the AMWU was the first blue-collar union to be computerised, way back, I think, in 1968, thanks to Laurie's leadership. I didn't even know computers were around then. Laurie promoted the establishment of our National Research Centre, the publication of popular educational pamphlets on the economy and social issues such as Australia on the Rack, and the flourishing of our own internal program for delegates and officials, of which Max Ogden, who is here tonight, was such a valuable leader. Laurie was at the centre of the big battles of the second half of the 20th century. He was one of the patient architects of the struggle to defeat penal powers. Our union, along with others, paid the fines and penalties for industrial action until the judgment was reached that the momentum was sufficient for an effective defiance of those penal powers. And that culminated in the jailing of Clary O'Shea and the national stop work action in which it participated. Laurie addressed a massive rally in central Melbourne outside the Arbitration Commission in Little Bourke Street, and many, many workers remember his electrifying address to this day. Even though we hope to win many important gains in our right to work, in our rights at work, in the new industrial laws that will be introduced into Parliament next week by Julia Gillard, we'll still need a similar patient strategy before we see the final end to the new penal powers that have been imposed by work choices. I remember when I was a shop steward and the notice came around that Laurie had been arrested in Karratha in northwestern Australia during the Fraser years. Such was the knowledge of Laurie that it wasn't too hard to persuade workers all around the country to stop work in support of the demand for his release. One final example, and I could give hundreds, relates to the issues of peace and internationalism. Laurie understood long before many about the significance of the growing power of transnational corporations. Some people have only just noticed this phenomenon. He supported research and organisation around these questions from the 1970s onwards. He understood that the only response to this power was to confront it both industrially and politically at both the national and the international level. One of the big battles of the union was to win workers' support for its position on peace and disarmament. This became a major challenge when the union opposed the war in Vietnam, at a time when it was still very popular in the Australian community, underpinned by a wave of Cold War anti-communist propaganda. Laurie worked tirelessly, and in the end thousands of metal workers joined the protests. For Laurie, it was also personal because of his son Laurie's, who's here tonight, opposition to conscription. Laurie would be the first person to point out that none of these achievements were his. Nothing is ever achieved without a collective approach and the work of our delegates and members. However, it's equally true that nothing is ever achieved without an effective and strategic plan and good leadership, and Laurie has certainly delivered that in spades. There are a few people who were very keen to be here tonight, who particularly wanted their comments recorded, and I'm just going to briefly refer to a couple of those in conclusion. But first, just to mention that there are two great fighters of for the workers in Australia. Alan Ritter and Jack Brown were too frightened to get on the plane. Now, we told them it wasn't that bad, but it was too late, they'd missed the plane. Anyway, they send their regards. And Frank Cherry, in particular, on behalf of the Retired Members Association, says, "It only seems like yesterday that Kathy and I, in our little flat in East St Kilda, wrote piles of how to vote cards for the AEU election, vote one for Laurie Carmichael for the Melbourne District Secretary." And that's the time when Laurie first became a full-time official of the union. He also refers to the key role that you played against the terrible and unjust war in Vietnam, leading up to the moratorium marches and the final end of the war. Those dramatic events at the Williamstown court as you and Val defended your son Laurie against being conscripted to go to Vietnam. Our great union and the broader working class has much to thank you for. You stand tall amongst the greats of the trade union movement. And that's some of what Frank Cherry had to say. There's also a letter from Bob Hawke, former Prime Minister of Australia, who says that he deeply regrets that my absence overseas prevents me from joining with you tonight in celebrating the achievements of a man who is one of the giants of the Australian trade union movement. Laurie was a militant trade unionist who was always prepared to pursue industrial action if he believed it was necessary in the interests of achieving better conditions for the people he represented. Of course, his contribution to the Australian working class went far beyond his direct activities in pursuing improvements in wages and working conditions. As one who had not had the opportunity to fully develop his obviously innate abilities within the formal education system, he had a profound commitment to education. As you all know, he played a vital role in the Employment and Skills Foundation Council, which was instrumental in significantly improving the vocational education and training system in Australia. Laurie is a man of extremely strongly held opinions, but he was not a dogmatist. He was a good listener and always a positive contributor to discussions. Laurie, I wish you well in your 84th year and join all of those present tonight in celebrating you on this occasion of your 50th anniversary of commencing as a full-time official in the trade union movement. Bob Hawke. One final message, and this is from Bill Kelty, former Secretary of the ACTU. I'm very sorry that I'm unable to attend the dinner as I will be overseas, probably with Bob Hawke. Anyway, he says this, that Laurie Carmichael is one of the most exceptional people that I have ever met. He is to the Australian trade unionism what Mozart was to music, Phar Lap to horse racing, Wally Lewis to rugby league, John Coleman to Essendon supporters, and now Barack Obama to black people throughout the world. Simply an inspiration. As a practising unionist, he combined extraordinary intellect, strategic genius and practical capacity to improve the position of working people. There's hardly a condition of employment that was not impacted by the campaigns that he led. His campaigning strategy was unambiguously a struggle for the class of working people. Education, agitation, localised achievement, consolidation and universalisation. That's what Laurie did. He used the strong for the benefit of all. However important were the industrial objectives of money and time, there was in some sense a greater cause that drove Laurie Carmichael. That extraordinary passion of his to advance the quality of life of working people and those without access to power and influence. This translated itself into industrial democracy, to the right to strike, to respect for the environment, to striving for peace, for safety at work, Indigenous rights, healthcare, art and culture, and in a sense, most importantly, education. There are countless stories about Laurie that could be told and should be told. However, all I need to do is to confirm something my mother said about him an age ago. My mother believed he was a remarkable person and told me that if I ever got to meet him, that would be the meeting of a lifetime, and she was right. My life and the lives of countless others has been richer for knowing Laurie and richer for the contribution he's made to the fabric of this country. This is not wealth that's measured in money, but a wealth that is measured in value and ideas and inspiration and sheer character. Laurie is a great and remarkable and larger-than-life man, a wonderful and inspiring trade unionist, and a champion for workers who's made an extraordinary contribution to workers and this country. Bill Kelty.